Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I'm going to review another batch of the Boomsday Project cards for you guys. Things are spicing up quite a bit. We're getting to see more of what we can expect from the upcoming expansion, so let's get to it. These are from, I think about 4 or 5 days ago. A Noyo module. So it's a 4-mana 2/4 Divine Shield taunt, and it's a mech, of course, because it has the magnetic, say module, magnetic, whatever. Basically, the magnetic mechanic is you can put this minion's stats and abilities onto a mech that is already in play, and that can attack right away. It's not like a transform effect. It's just like a merging effect, and so you can basically add these to a minion and in turn give it kind of like charge. So, is a 4-mana 2/4 Divine Shield taunt good? No, it is not. We have one that's kind of a 3-mana 2/4 Divine Shield taunt right now. In Arena, it's okay. So in Constructed, it's not really good enough. This card, however, if you're playing the magnetized version of it, you're getting basically a charged Divine Shield effect. And charged Divine Shield effects, we know traditionally in Hearthstone, are very powerful. So basically, the power level of this card is going to be entirely based on whether a Paladin can stick minions on the board or not. You have to look at it kind of like a buff. It's kind of like Kings. It's not as much attack, but you get Divine Shield, so you might get the attack for another turn. And if you have absolutely nothing, it's a Desperation taunt play. So it's a very good card, but quite meta dependent. I think mechs are going to survive in some way or another. Maybe it's Paladin, but it might not be like an early game type deck. So it's possible this might not see much play if Paladin can't stick those early game mechs when it really needs to. We'll see about that. We have a weapon. This is a warrior weapon, Super Collider. It's a 5-mana 1/3. Wow, that's some real crap stats. So after you attack a minion, you force it to attack one of its neighbors. So there's maybe some RNG involved in that if there's just a row of lots and lots of minions. But the idea is that with one attack, you can get a 2-for-1 hit with a weapon. And it can be very good to do that. You might even take out 2 large minions at the same time. So I have a few thoughts about this weapon that I think might bring things into perspective for you. So weapons are really good in Hearthstone because they offer unconditional tempo and push. Just they push on the board or they push face. If your opponent refuses to play stuff, you're typically going to start going face, and then a weapon is really good at going face because typically weapons have more than one attack. So the flexibility of using a weapon for face damage versus minion damage is certainly super good, and this doesn't do that. Now, the other part of weapon is just unconditional move. It just does stuff all the time. Now, with this, if your opponent is playing one minion, well, it literally is horrible. You just can't do anything. You can't hit the one minion for 1 damage, not really, and you can't push for face damage. So it's a weapon, and the main advantage of weapons is that they're very flexible, but it loses almost all of that flexibility. So it's very difficult to assess a card like this. I also want to mention that a lot of the time people don't need to play around positional effects because those cards are not quite good enough. Probably we peaked around Crushing Walls against Hunter, but that's about it. Explosive Shot and Betrayal and a few other positional mechanics are quite commonly seen in Arena, honestly. And what I have seen is the decent players just always play around this. I'm always playing against a rogue mindful of Betrayal, for instance. So Super Collider, it might have like an early push on ladder when the expansion is released because people are just not aware of this card. They don't know how to play around it. They don't know why to play around it. So it might have some really good results, out of the gate, let's say. But I think long-term results, the poor flexibility of this card are going to make it a bit of a challenge for it to survive. But not an impossibility. If a lot of people are playing decks with minions that all have very similar stats to one another, kind of like mid-range decks, it would still be a really good card even if your opponent is constantly playing around it. So fairly weak, I would say, given all the circumstances, but still could be viable. We haven't really seen a large quantity of mid-range decks invading ladder in some time, so I wouldn't count on it. Then we have the Druid Legendary Minion. So each class in the upcoming Boomsday expansion, it's getting a legendary spell and a legendary not spell. So minions, I guess, except for warrior, which we'll take a look at in a second. So this is Druid's non-spell legendary. It has been the talk of the town. It is a 4-mana 3/4 that when it's in your hand, it becomes a copy of the last thing that you played. So basically, it makes Combo Druid a bit more consistent. And let me tell you, Combo Druid is pretty consistent and pretty good already. So it has some people justifiably concerned, honestly, that this card might take the Druid combo archetype totally out of control. That's certainly possible. My analysis on the card, and trust me, I have played a hell of a lot of Combo Druid, both in Standard, both in Wild, multiple variations of anything you can imagine. You guys know that if you've watched my YouTube videos for some time now. I love Combo Druid. So I kind of know the ropes, and my analysis is that yes, it is good. I can see putting this card in a lot of those decks, but I don't think it's quite as powerful as some people think. And the reason is, there are other tools that allow you to get these combos off. That's why these decks exist to begin with. And Floop, while it might seem like it's easier, I don't think it's easier. I think it's just harder to stop. And there's a big distinction between those two. So the way I think about it is a lot of the time when I have most of my combo pieces, the decks can already function. With the Floop, you can make it harder to stop by increasing the amount of damage. For instance, if you're playing a Malygos Druid, you can play Malygos for 9, and then the follow-up turn, you have a 4-mana Malygos, and you can combo off of that, extremely. The issue with that is, not all the time, but a fairly large portion of the games that you do use your combo in, they're very marginal. A lot of those games, you're not going to be able to just do, you have 10 mana and you just play Malygos and nothing else. If you're able to do that, that's probably a game that you've won already. So that's why I think it's a little bit less powerful than people think. I certainly think it's extremely powerful. I just don't think it's like game-breaking powerful. I think it might up the power level of Combo Druid a little bit, and I understand it's already a good deck, but we also have to understand that with each expansion that comes out throughout the year, the expansions that come out later in the year typically have more powerful cards, so you play them. That's typically how Blizzard runs things. So I think most other decks are going to receive a power level jump. So if the Combo Druid, which is a pretty good deck right now, gets also a small power level jump, it might not break the deck because it might just be in line with the new decks that people are playing. So I think it might actually be a fair card, but we'll have to see what other tools Druid is getting in this expansion so we could really verify that claim. Some of the other Druid cards then. We got Dendrologist. So they're introducing this Treant mechanic. It's a 2-mana 2/3, so that's very solid. And if you have a Treant in play already, you get to discover a spell. Discovery is very good. Spells are very good. Druid spells are notably good. So this card is pretty good if you're playing with Treants. Now, the token decks that are on ladder already kind of do that. We know that Blizzard's expansion cycle is like 1 to 2 expansions in advance, so Blizzard may have designed these cards without knowing that the token druid that's currently being played on ladder would have existed, because that is actually a fairly new deck. That deck did not exist when the Witchwood expansion was released. People figured it out about halfway through, so these cards might actually be a lot better than they seem, because Blizzard may not have really truly accounted for all of them. And they're coming up with more Treant mechanics. We have a 3-mana 2/2/2 Treant through a spell. Is this good? I think it's good. And it's notably a spell. So if you want to run kind of like the recruit 4 or less mechanic, which is still going to be in standard, you can play a 3-mana minion. That's pretty good. Now, the only downside of this card is ramp effects in Druid are so strong that you typically don't want very many 3-drops, because your ideal hand is play something on turn 2, then play something on turn 4. So we'll have to see how good this card is, but I imagine if you're playing full-fledged Treant deck, you're going to need all these inclusions. Mulch Master is another Treant synergistic druid card. It's a 10 mana 8/8. It has Rush, so it can attack into your opponent's minions right away, and it's kind of in the Giant where it has a discount effect, and it costs 1 less for each friendly Treant that died this game. So not just playing the Treants, they have to die. Now, it's pretty easy to kill off a lot of Treants, but there's not a lot of cards that do it. So consistency-wise, I don't know, but if you can get that effect fairly consistently, if you can get this card anywhere near 0 mana, oh my god, it's going to be totally ridiculous. There's even some possibility of playing this with Splinterroot and getting a 10/10 version that you can also play on the same turn if you reach that 0 mana cost threshold. So this card is good, potentially game-breaking based on how easy it is to get Treants on the board. Right now, I'd say it's not that easy, but there's still a bunch of cards left to be seen of the upcoming expansion, and there's going to be expansions in the future, so who knows where that's going to end up. And we have the legendary spell for Paladin. So it resurrects 3 mechs, so they have to die, and they get to keep their magnetic upgrades. So for 7 mana, that's going to be a pretty valuable card no matter what, but it's a legendary card, and it's the first reason that we've seen other than the cards themselves, to play mechs in Paladin. They mentioned that Paladin, Hunter, and Warrior are going to have additional mechs, additional class cards that are going to synergize with the mech themes. So this, I guess, is the first of hopefully other ones, because alone I don't think it's going to do it for the mech synergistic stuff. Now, yeah, for 7 mana worth of stuff, if you're resurrecting 3 of like anything, you're getting good value. So there's no way that this card is bad. It's an impossibility that this card is bad. This card is always going to be good. It's just, constructed as a fairly crowded space. So is this card really going to compete with the likes of Odd Paladin or, Even Paladin or just Aggro Paladins? Is it really? I don't know. That is a really tough question to answer. From what we've seen of the mechs, I haven't seen enough mechs that truly stick on the board to allow Paladins to push for a mid-game to late-game victory. So I'm not convinced quite yet, but I'm sure we haven't come even close to seeing all the mechs in the upcoming Boomsday expansion. So a card to watch out for. I think it's going to be really good, but we don't really have enough information to truly judge what's likely going to happen. We have some Death Rattle synergy. It's on another mech, but they did mention that some classes are getting mech synergy, and Priest was not one of them. So the fact that it's a mech, I'm assuming based on their statements, is not that relevant. It is a Death Rattle synergy card. However, 2 mana 2/1, a Death Rattle draws a Death Rattle minion from your deck. So it's a nice cantrip 2-drop. Priests really like those, especially Quest Priests. Really going to like this because it's a double Death Rattle trigger. It's just very good. It's just a very good card. Nothing really bad to say about it, and has some synergy with the next Priest card, the Reckless Experimenter. It's a 5 mana 4/6, and Death Rattle minions you play cost 3 less, just the Death Rattle ones. But they die at the end of turn. So this has some people kind of confused. Like, really? That doesn't seem that good. It's pretty damn good. Let me tell you why. In Hearthstone, the ability to cycle through your deck at an accelerated rate is extremely powerful. And if you're playing this with the other card I just talked about, or even cards like Loot Hoarder, it's extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful because you can play this and do like Loot Hoarder, Dreadringer. You can do Thalnos. There's a few other Death Rattle cards that just have powerful effects, not necessarily draw. But getting guaranteed triggers, getting guaranteed deck cycle, getting combos potentially with some cubes or something like that, oh man, it'll get so out of control. I think right now, we don't quite have enough Death Rattle minions to just break the game with this card. But again, we haven't seen that many cards of this expansion, and there's certainly going to be future expansions with Death Rattle cards. So this is going to be one of those cards that you just have to go back and revisit. This is going to be a card that eventually is going to be a game-breaking wild deck. So keep an eye out for that. Some of the neutrals, we got Faithful Lumi, 1 mana 1/1, battle card, give a mech +1/+1. It is not a magnetic effect, so that's good because you get the body and you get to buff another mech, but I don't know. I feel like 1-drops have to be really good for you to play them. They have to be really consistent for you to play them. So until we see another really good 1-drop mech, I'm not convinced. The way this card sees play is if there's like, a well-statted 1-mana mech that doesn't have a condition like this one. You play that on turn 1, or you play that on turn 1 going second and coin the Faithful Lumi just to get that huge stat push in the early game. Those are game-winning early game plays. It's missing its friend right now. So we'll have to see. We have another Omega card. This time it's for Warlock, Omega Agent. It's a 5-mana 4/5, so that is trash tier stats. But you know what? Warlock plays control a lot. If you have played control Warlock, even if you've played Warlock in Arena lately, where you almost always draft a control deck, you'll find yourself playing Warlock and having very inefficient turns in the late game, not even necessarily on 10 mana. If you're on like 6 mana or something and your opponent just does a weak play, you want to set up a better board clear. And, cards like these kind of just like play it out to stall the game a little bit better, are actually quite fitting for a Warlock despite their pretty horrible stats per mana cost. However, the Omega effect is 12-15 in stats for 5 mana. That's totally insane. The fact that you can probably do like a Shadow Flame or even like a combo spell damage defile board clear and then lead on the same turn for 12-15 in stats, you're talking about some of the craziest game swinging moments you'll ever see. So this card is spectacular. In Arena, it might even break the class. And in Constructed, I actually think it has a chance despite its horrible starting stats. Rogue card, we have Lab Recruiter, 2-mana 3/2. If you've played in the past, it's basically gang up on a guy. So you shuffle 3 copies of a friendly minion to your deck. You can't choose your opponent's minions, and that actually is a problem sometimes. A lot of the time when I've played, gang up cycle decks, I actually wanted to hit my opponent's minions with the card. So the fact that you can't means it's more internalized combo and synergy rather than the high flexibility, but you get a really good body to it, so it's going to be a very good card for sure. There's no doubt about it. I don't really know the best use for it yet, but I'll let you guys know what I come up with when we see more of the cards. Weaponized Pinata, it's a 4-cost 4/3, and the death rattle gives you legendary card advantage. Cards like these are typically not particularly good in Constructed because their stats are rather weak. So yes, 4 mana 4/3 with no tempo gain on the death rattle. You're just not going to see much play from that. We've seen similar statted cards with similar effects, honestly, even in Priest, and they just couldn't cut it tempo-wise. So I don't have a good feeling about the viability of this card in Constructed, but it should be pretty entertaining to break this Pinata in Arena. Demonic Project. This is the Warlock Project spell. So the idea of these spells are they have effects that affect both players equally. The idea of this card, so you basically transform a minion in each hand into a demon. So if you don't want to transform one of your minions into a random demon, you can just play this when you don't have any demons left in your hand. But potentially you could give your opponent a really good demon from one of his crappy minions. So yeah, it's going to be a hit and miss. The real hit on this card is playing against combo decks. So for instance, if you're playing against combo druids require several specific minions, and those minions usually are going to be in the hand for quite some time before you can pull a combo off. So playing a Demonic Project could just break the combo entirely. It's a combo breaker card. It's going to be one of these very situational cards, but honestly, they're almost always combo decks on ladder. It just depends how frequently you play into them. So if a third of your games are against combo decks, yes, Demonic Project is great. If 1 in 10 of your games are against combo decks and most are against aggro, Demonic Project is certainly total garbage. So very meta dependent. But again, this is a card that is just good enough on its own. You'll have to make the judgment based on what you're playing against in ladder, whether or not to include this card. Unexpected Results mage spell that summons 2 minions, and they start off at 2-cost minions. So you play this, you get 2 random 2 costs, which is like okay. I think it's on the weak side. I think I'd rather have just like, honestly, like a Chillwind Yeti most of the time. But the idea is if you have spell damage, it doesn't increase the number of minions, it increases the mana cost. So if you have 2 spell damage, you'll get 2 random 4 drops. So it's a very interesting card. I struggle to see why it would be that good in general. We will have to see a lot more spell damage synergies similar to this one, or just spells that scale off of spell damage particularly well for this card to see much play. But I kind of welcome it. It's going to be madness because a lot of time you're not going to have spell damage, and a lot of the time you're going to get Doomsayers. So, oh man, it's going to be hell sometimes. We have the Warrior non-spell legendary, and we know that it was going to be a hero card. It is Dr. Boom Mad Genius, a 7 mana... Well, it doesn't have 7 attack, but it has 7 health. You get 7 armor, kind of. And for the rest of the game, your mechs have rush, so they can attack into other minions immediately, and that is a very powerful effect. When you become Dr. Boom, again, warrior only, you also alter your hero power. However, you don't have a consistent hero power. Every single turn, your hero power becomes a random new hero power. So you can't get the same one back to back. There are 5 hero powers that you can get, and they're all really good. So let's have a look here. We got Micro Squad. You basically get 3 1/1s for 2 mana. Is that good? Oh, that is amazing. You can deal 3 damage to something. Amazing. You can discover a mech. This is probably rather weak, but you might be playing a control game because, well, you're playing warrior and you probably can defend your health total with rushed mechs pretty well. And hey, why not have another one? So it's actually better than it looks. You gain 7 armor. Wow, that's really good. So there's 5 hero powers, right? And they cycle between them, and one gives you 7 armor. That's almost as if you're warrior hero powering every single turn for health. On average, there's some RNG involved here, but on average, it's like you're maintaining the warrior hero power at the same time. So it's so good. And the last one is 1 damage to all your opponent's minions. This one's a bit more situational, and because it switches every turn, that might be the worst one on average, but it might be the best one in the right circumstance. So it's a heavy RNG hero power card, but honestly, all of these effects are really good. So yes, this card is very fun. It's going to be very powerful. I think it probably is enough to push warrior players to run the mech archetype. The only disadvantage to this is because of the extreme high power level of the card. I mean, this is a 7 mana hero card. Hero cards are all really good. The lower the mana cost, the better they are. This is a 7 mana, extremely powerful hero card. So yeah, people are going to have to play this. So people have to play random cards. So people who don't like random cards, well, tough shit. We have a Paladin Secret Autodefense Matrix, and when one of your minions is attacked, you give it Divine Shield. So aggro versus aggro is going to be pretty bad, but other than that, it should be pretty decent, though I imagine it's not decent enough to run just by itself. You'd have to have some secret mechanics, but there are some secret mechanics in Paladin, so we might have to look out for those decks, and if there are any more secret mechanics, that might even take over the Paladin archetype. And lastly, from the cards, we have Omega Medic. It's a 3 mana 3/4 priest minion, and if you have 10 mana, you restore 10 health to your hero. So standalone, it honestly doesn't look like super crazy on first glance, but let's be realistic. This is the card that priests, since the beginning of Hearthstone, have been looking for. It is a well-statted early game minion with a late game bounce effect. That combination of cards into one is truly outstanding, specifically for priest. So you might have to watch out for this card, certainly. The last thing I want to mention is the pre-release schedule, I guess. The card reveal schedule is out on the main Boomsday Project website, and a particular fan tweeted the image that there might be a mechanized Cthulhu coming up, as you can see there in the top right. So should be some exciting stuff coming up. Hope you guys enjoy this card review, and I hope you guys tune in for the next view.